Good afternoon. I'm high up in the Four Peaks Wilderness area, looking north at the Mazatzo Mountains in the distance, and I'm going to break here to talk some anime.
Last Exile.
Last Exile is a retro sci-fi anime series set in a world slightly different from our own. It's a world similar to early 20th century Europe in many ways, but where aviation technology has taken a different direction. Instead of simple dirigibles and biplanes, this world has huge flying airships that seem to levitate thanks to a unique engine technology provided by the very secretive Guild. Two earthbound nations, Anatory and Disith, are at war. Disith is a cold land. Anatory, where most of the story takes place, is warm but arid, a place where water is precious. These two nations are separated by a band of violent air currents they call the Grand Stream. The two nations are fighting their long war with fleets of large airships armed with cannons and supplemented by riflemen. It's very much like an 18th century naval battle, but fought in the sky. In contrast to those two nations, the small and mysterious Guild live with far superior technology in a huge fortress floating up in the sky. The Guild doles out engines fueled by a precious element called Claudia that allow the other two nations' airships to travel, and not incidentally that allow those two nations to pursue war on one another. Communications in this world is similarly back in the 18th century. Without telegraph or radio, they're limited to voice tubes, signal flares, and semaphore lanterns. When anything else has to go in the mail, it's sent via special courier. Like as not, that courier will use a van ship, a small two-person aircraft that can deliver over long distances. And that brings us to our two main characters. Klaus Volka and Lavi Head are two teenagers making a living as van ship couriers. Klaus is an exceptional pilot, and Lavi is a talented navigator and mechanic. Klaus and Lavi are both orphans who've grown up together, almost like brother and sister, after their fathers died together in their van ship while attempting to cross the Grand Stream. Now the two teenagers work and live together in a small house they built for themselves, taking odd delivery jobs, racing against their fellow pilots, and aspiring to complete their father's mission and cross the Grand Streams themselves. The world of casual flying they inhabited reminded me of Porco Rosso's Adriatic, but without all the water. Klaus and Lavi get their first taste of warfare when they undertake a risky delivery from a noble family to a battleship on the front lines, and they arrive during a battle. But the young aviator's career really takes a strange turn when they run into an injured van ship pilot who was being pursued. When they reluctantly agree to complete his mission for him, everything changes.
任務を引き継いでほしい。
僕に
That downed courier's cargo was a young girl, Alvis, and her destination is the feared and legendary rogue airship, the Silvana. And oh yes, there are people who don't want her to make it there. The fearsome sky privateer Alex Rowe is commander of the Silvana. At first glance, Alex seems to have a Captain Harlock thing going, terse, brooding, and striking poses. And he has a very scary reputation, but he'll turn out to be a bit more flawed than the space pirate. Alex and his crew generally ignore the orders from Anatory, fight in the war as they see fit, and defy even the orders of the Guild itself. But the Silvana is the baddest airship in the sky, and its Claudia engine isn't under Guild control for some reason, and they have a plan to overthrow the very Guild. Once aboard the Silvana, Last Exile's cast really expands with plenty of bright and engaging characters. Sophia, the Silvana's second officer, has an interesting family history. The crew and mechanics on the flight deck, Tatiana and Alistair, the Silvana's ace van ship team, Mullen Shetland, a rifleman Klaus and Ravi met on an earlier delivery to another battleship. One of the Guild's young elite members, Dio, takes an interest in Klaus's flying, and after toying with him for a bit in the air, invites himself aboard the Silvana with his servant and co-pilot Luciola to have a little chat with Klaus. And it's all these splendid characters that make Last Exile its greatest strength. As these people interact, get to know each other and evolve, we see them grow and change. They reveal their qualities and their flaws. Friends drift apart and suspicion turns to trust. The series takes time to develop these characters under stress as well as in quieter moments. It's a lot easier to get people interested in a story when they believe in and care about the characters. There are reunions and deaths in this story that both tug at the heartstrings. Sadly, there's one character who they didn't do terribly well with, and it hurts the story. Maestro Delphine, the head of the guild. So long as the guild is a mysterious organization that manipulates the world through its technology, it works as the show's villain. But in later episodes, when Delphine takes the spotlight as its leader, she comes off as a cruel but cardboard villainess, a cackling villain without much personality who simply delights in flaunting her wealth and power. But beyond cruelty, there doesn't seem to be much rhyme or reason to her action. A great action story needs a good villain whose motives we understand. On the other hand, I especially like the portrayal of little Alvis in this anime, who comes off splendidly as a little kid with their mixture of boldness and timidity. For example, when Alvis is staying in Ravi's bedroom, she wakes in the middle of the night to discover Ravi's old stuffed toy lamb on a shelf. The relationship of Klaus and Ravi is central to the story, of course. After a time, they'll drift apart as Klaus undertakes combat, and Ravi sadly has to tell her that she can't fly in his sky anymore. That'll shake up some pairings and give us a whole new set of character dynamics among the supporting cast. Last Exile isn't afraid of making changes or shifting focus. The story is strong enough to carry the large cast, especially in the middle where a lot of stories drag. Alex and Sophia are slowly collecting pieces of something mysterious called Exile, with which they hope to take on the guild. There's plenty of action in the battles between nations. The Sylvana will get into fights with just about everybody at some time or another. And of course there are some skirmishes with the mighty guild leading up to the conclusion. And there are plenty of quiet personal moments too. There are a few inconsistencies in the plot that are slightly annoying, and there are lots of unanswered questions. Occasionally you'll have to connect some dots with some pretty long lines. Some of these lacunae are addressed in the small booklets that came with the original DVD release, especially the info on the Disseth fleet and Exile itself. Lastly, the finale is a little too messianic for my taste, but at least the ending makes sense. The story's pacing accelerates, slows, turns, and twists like a van ship in a dogfight, often following several separate tracks simultaneously. It gives the large cast plenty of time to show their stuff, and I think the quiet passages really help to develop those characters. The story is willing to kill off a couple of its beloved characters to keep us anxious too. There are half a dozen different screenwriters and storyboarders credited with the individual episodes, but it seems director Koichi Shigira is credited with the plotting. Gonzo's animation is sometimes distracting in this anime. It mixes hand-drawn 2D character art with 3D computer artwork for van ships and airships. It's from the same creative team that produced Blue Sub No. 6 a few years before. In 2003, Gonzo hadn't worked out the integration of the two art styles. I'm not sure they still have. As long as we're just looking at the traditional animation, it's quite good. Or if we're looking at a sky full of airships in a dogfight, the 3D also looks very good, just different. In fact, the computer graphics make for some spectacular aerial combat scenes.
His piloting skills are very good.
Come now, I've already seen that move.
Who is he?
It's only when the scene transitions between 3D and 2D, or worse, combines both in the same shot, that the differences in fluid motion and shading become all too apparent. For example, on the hangar deck.
Start checklist complete. Check.
The opening music, Cloud Age Symphony, was unusual enough to catch my attention, but I thought the interior music by Dolce Triad often didn't seem to work with the scene it was illustrating. It didn't add much to the excitement or the softer moments, and it seemed overkill in the amusing moments. It tried too hard to crack a joke. I didn't care at all for Genian's English dub. Genian didn't break down their voice cast by character, but Lavi and several of the supporting cast sounded weak and awkward. I strongly recommend sticking with the original Japanese soundtrack for this one. So, I give Last Exile 4 stars. I really loved half a dozen of these characters, and I liked the unique and detailed world they inhabited. And for the most part, I liked the story, though it could have used a more interesting villain. Last Exile was originally released by Genion on 7 DVDs. Only the first DVD had a notable extra, a short subtitled interview with production designer Mihiro Maeda. Each comes with a small booklet giving all the geeky schematics for the van ships and the airships, the Sylvana, the Urbanus, and others. As I mentioned, the later ones on the Disseth Fleet and Exile itself fill in some useful information not obvious in the anime itself. Last Exile is now distributed by Funimation, and I haven't seen their collection. Thanks for watching.